Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on our central question of whether or not prohibition was necessary during the 1920s and 1930s. With that in mind, we're going to examine a primary source document here that was generated by the Scientific Temperance Association on alcoholism and degeneracy. Okay. With that in mind, when we're looking at these sources, we need to consider some of the ideas that are being brought in of whether or not alcohol does affect a child while it's in the womb with their mother in consumption during the pregnancy. So, when we look at this here, there was a study that was concluded about temperate families versus non-temperate families. Okay. Very temperate, meaning that these children were in a family that does not come from drinking or any sort of alcohol consumption. Okay. Within this study, we're going to see that we had 61 children versus 57 children. Okay. And you can obviously see also in the comparison that we have a large amount of children that die in infancy versus not. So, from this conclusion, we could gather that children that are in the womb at the time of pregnancy and their mothers are drinking, that they have a higher likelihood of dying in infancy, okay, about 5 times more. We have a comparison of St. Virtue's dance, different kind of disease that we really don't qualify from that anymore. Two were backward, not idiotic, and two were deformed. Okay. When you take these scientific terms, but then also compare them to it, okay, 6 were idiotic, 5 were deformed, 5 were dwarf, 5 were epileptic. Okay. The biggest question we do need to consider is this actually a scientific idea? Many of these genealogical traits of being dwarfed, okay, so these would be people that are vertically challenged or little people. Is that something that's actually caused by alcohol, or is this something that is caused just by genetics? When we talk about idiotic, all right, and these are some of the scientific terms that are considered at this point in time as science. This might be somebody who has Down syndrome, which is through genealogy, not necessarily alcohol, but could be traced to. But then you also look at normal. Okay, where is our study in normal? Okay, there's obviously a huge discrepancy between the two of children that are born into normal families. Okay, or children that were born normal into normal families that were non-temperate versus 10. Okay, so you could definitely gather that even though the science is pretty primitive at this point in time, that there is a lot of evidence that families that do not drink while they are pregnant are having a better chance of not being different, not dying. Okay. Our biggest question that we would want to consider when we look into alcoholism and degeneracy and looking at this graph is if there is bias or if this is a reliable source. Okay. This is obviously brought in by the Scientific Temperance Journal. So they are going to have an opinion of, alcohol is bad. But then also, there's not necessarily any evidence, proof, or any sourcing that shows that this study was actually concluded or was practiced. We're going to see that if you go down here at the bottom, there is an investigation in Switzerland from 1878 to 1889. They were from the same section and similarly situated, except regardless of intemperance. One of the biggest problems with this source that we need to consider, and if alcohol is actually an influence on pregnancy, is the time frame. Okay, we're talking about data that is 50 plus years old, so that's something to consider. Okay, we're also looking at alcoholic parents versus temperate parents. Within this chart and within this poster, it does not say mother versus father. Okay, that could be if your father drank. There wasn't any evidence that that could influence a child, but you see the normal children versus defective children. It's almost an exact split, which does prove, and you could conclude that this split would show that normal children or parents that do not drink alcohol during pregnancy have a better chance of being normal versus defective children. Okay. Science at the time is not necessarily that progressive. We don't have the technology to really investigate until after the child is born. But like I said, you kind of look at like how can you conclude what is backward? How can you conclude what is idiotic? Deformity, is that something that was actually caused by alcohol? So when we talk about this tomorrow, I want you to consider all the ideas that are being brought into whether or not alcohol affects these children, but if it was necessary to be banned at this point in time because of it. Thank you.